Oftentimes, the greatest enemy of future progress is past success. Today, we're going to begin a two-part conversation that's all about staying hungry and humble as a leader.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Echo Leadership Podcast. My name is David, and I'm here with Andy Wood today. And we are all about helping you get better as a leader on this podcast. So we're so glad you're joining us from all around the Bay Area and all over the country. Andy, today we're talking about being hungry and humble as a leader, man. It's going to be a great topic.
Yeah, this conversation is really important and timely for us as leaders. You know, when we look at so many great examples of people that we love, that we respect, oftentimes they're successful for a season. And many of the greatest falls that we've seen in leadership have come from people who have been the most successful leaders that we know. And so it's good for us. We're not trying to throw anybody under the bus here or make a bad example or not give grace to people who have fallen, but we want to learn. And so today we're here to talk about how do we stay humble? How do we stay hungry? And my hope, David, is that there's somebody who's listening to this podcast that is either a church leader or a business leader, that this conversation for them will prevent them from having a fall as a leader. That what we talk about today will lay a framework. It will lay maybe even put out some hard attitudes for people that will help them finish the race that God has for them.
Yeah, and this conversation really is significant in this time in history because there have been, especially in the church world where we come out of, we've seen a lot of news of leaders who have fallen recently or made decisions that shipwrecked their leadership. And so this really is significant. I can't wait to get into it because I know personally it's going to be good for us as well. And one thing we want to let leaders know, I think we'll probably talk at some point about this, but we get isolated as leaders. And that's one of the issues it causes. So we want to let you know about an opportunity to come together with other leaders happening right here in the Bay Area. Some of you may have heard about it, but if you're brand new here to the Echo Leadership Podcast, we have a conference coming up in May called the Echo Leadership Conference on Thursday, May 19th. Andy, can you tell us just a brief summary of the heartbeat of this conference?
Yeah, the vision behind it is to get in a room with a bunch of other leaders that are passionate, that are trying to get better, and something happens in the room. There's a power that when you're in the room together, you encourage each other, you strengthen one another. So we're going to have some incredible content and speakers. We've got Louis Giglio from Passion City Church. We've got Hosanna Wong. We have Grant Skeldon, who's an expert on connecting with Gen Z, Gen Y. It's going to be just an all-around awesome day. But more than the content is the connection that we're excited about.
Absolutely. So, hey, we want to invite you as the Echo Leadership Collective to come join us on May 19th for this conference. You can get information, get tickets, find out more at echoleadership.org. That's echoleadership.org. And right now, we also have a special group rate for $79 a ticket. So you can bring a whole group, bring your team, because it's always better as a team. And if you use the promo code ELP10, that's ELP10, you'll even get $10 off of our regular ticket price when you buy a ticket today. So be sure you go check it out, echoleadership.org. Can't wait to see you then.
Let me say one other thing about this, why leaders should come to this conference. First of all, this race that you're running, you need your bucket filled back up. You need gas in the tank, or if you have an electric car, you need to recharge that electric car. But
thanks, Tesla.
So this conference is really about a recharge for you as a leader. Secondly, these kinds of experiences give us language. They give us, for our teams, they give us tools, and they help a whole team get more cohesive and go further faster. And so both of those things, if it's only for those two things, it's worth coming.
Yeah, and every time you do this, it's a vision lifter. I love that. And even when you listen to podcasts like this together, the goal is to lift the vision and get better as a team. So if you're listening with this as a team or an individual as well today, you can get a lot out of it. Getting the leader guide at echo.church/leadership podcast. That's echo.church/leadership podcast. We're going to have a leader guide right there to help you go through this episode to take notes and get the most out of it. So Andy, we started off talking about this idea of staying hungry and humble and why this matters. Let's jump in a little bit to this conversation. And what is it that causes leaders to start to lose that fervor, that hungriness?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what's interesting about success is every person who is successful in any arena of life, whether it's finances or a business that they run or even a church leader. And, success is it's a funny word, right? Because your definition of success really does matter. It's probably one of the most important words to define. But let's just figuratively say, we're thinking about maybe the standard mindset that people have around things that grow and things that over time they increase in size and scope and scale and all that. Well, when you do have a measure of success, people can begin to look at you and they start to overlook things in you that perhaps when you're smaller or you're starting that they wouldn't overlook. And you can begin to allow behaviors, hard attitudes, mindsets in, and they creep in slowly over a period of time, but eventually they become the limiting factor to the future, both to your character and your competency as a leader.
What role do you think success? Now, to preface this, we want to be successful.
Right. We want to win.
We believe in winning as leaders. We want to win. We are not bashing success and we are not letting off the gas pedal. Okay. But what role do you think success can play in creating isolation for a leader?
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think, again, it's probably worth coming back to your definition of success. And I would say one of the best exercises that you could do as a leader, or probably just as a human, like, what is my definition of success? And get real descriptive. For me personally, my definition of success is one word. It's faithful. Am I faithful to what God has asked me to do? Now, that faithfulness produces fruitfulness. So when you're faithful and you do what God asked you to do, you experience a measure of fruitfulness. And I would say part of the reason why success can be isolating, as you are more fruitful, there are times where people, they want things from you, so they're interacting with you. They're not really interested in friendship or relationship with you. They're just interested in getting something from you. People tend to become more critical of those that experience a measure of success, and you can start to try to put walls up, perhaps because of the criticism, maybe even a measure of jealousy. So you're like, well, people that you interact with, you're not quite as free. Like when you start a church and you have 150 people show up at your first services and you share that, people are really excited for you. But there comes a point at which when you share success, it doesn't really help anybody. What happened, what the fruitfulness was. So I would just say you learn to have more discretion with what you say, but then you also have to have a level of discretion with who you let into your life. And if you're not careful, that you can swing the pendulum too far, and then you start to isolate yourself as a leader.
Yeah, and I've heard too, and I think it's true, is the more that you grow in leadership, they say it gets lonelier at the top. And when you get into that loneliness, that isolation, and you don't have anybody who's there, that's where you can get isolated and set yourself up for a fall. Which I know today we're going to start a 2-part podcast right here of being really practical for how we stay hungry and humble. So when we jump in, it kind of speaks to that here on this first point a little bit.
Yeah. So so we got 3 ideas we'll cover this time and 3 ideas we'll cover in the second episode. The first one is to remember your leadership journey. So it's to go back and kind of think of where did I start? Where was I as a leader? Where was I as a person when I began this whole journey?
Yeah, that's a great and very humbling question. When you think back, and the great thing is if you have people that you're still leading with who have done it with you for a long time, led with you for a long time, they're able to help go back there with you.
Yeah. Yeah. They know your warts. They know your scars. They know the things that maybe that you used to struggle with. And sometimes those things are funny and humorous. And it's good to be able to stay grounded in that. And to also, one of the things I find helpful about remembering the journey is to think there are a whole lot of people that have helped me or
Yeah.
helped us along the way. So they opened doors for us. They gave resources to us. They poured into us. And we wouldn't be where we are today without all these people that have come alongside of us in our journey. And I like to just allow that to be an exercise of gratitude to say, okay, if not for these influences, and then looking at, okay, what about the times in my life where God intervened on my behalf? I think about so many things that happened in our journey as a church. For example, God opened a door for us to get into a building, and God opened a door for resources financially for us. So all these things that God did, our placement today is a result of God's provision yesterday. And I have to remember that.
Yeah. Do you find, or do you have a regular practice of trying to reflect back at certain rhythms, or is this something that you typically do when it gets hard, when you hear about another leader that falls? Like, what does this look like for you in your personal life and leadership?
Yeah, some practical things I've done is I actually have a couple of weeks ago, I went back through a bunch of my old journals and just kind of was reading through some of the things that I had written down. I like to remember stories, of things that happened in the past where God provided or He showed up for me, and I just find that's super helpful. I also like to share stories in leadership that are some of my mistakes or stupid things I've done along the way. So, for example, in my 20s, I was always losing stuff, constantly losing keys and wallets. And it's hard to believe that anybody would even follow my leadership with as scattered as I was. And I still, in a lot of ways, struggle to this day, but it was way, way worse then. So sharing stories, remembering stories, and then sometimes just looking back through some of the things that God has done along the way helps me a ton.
Do you find it helpful for leadership teams to sit down and each person, maybe as a team building exercise, to reflect back together?
Yeah.
And kind of hear each other's journeys? And how would you maybe encourage a team leader, senior leader to navigate that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a process that a lot of organizations go through called a strat-op, or Intentional Churches does this. They have a concept called the Intentional Growth Plan. And when you do your first round, they call it an install. You basically do a historical reflection on the church, and you look back and you look at some of the moments that really were the catalyst moments to where you are today. And that exercise literally can be like a half a day exercise. But when you put all those stories on the wall, you start to see patterns, and you start to see lessons along the way. But that exercise is really, really a significant one.
That's good. So step one to staying hungry and humble is remember where you came from. There's a lot of, I feel like there's a couple of Southern roots, like remember your roots, son, and know where you came from. So you had a key question, I know, for this point as well.
Yeah, I love the reflection. What's one thing that had to go your way for you to get where you are today? So what's one big thing that you didn't make happen that had to go your way for you to get to where you are today? And just write it down and remember it.
That's really good. One good thing. So it'd be great. Share that with you as a team together, even as your leadership team. And it'll be a great conversation and team building exercise as well. So let's jump into point 2.
Yeah, number 2 is to cultivate self-awareness. And I would also say that when you pull together number 1, you're looking back, you are cultivating a level of self-awareness. And a lot of this is knowing who you are. It's knowing your strengths, it's knowing your weaknesses. And a lot of leaders, they don't know what it's like to be on the other side of them. So I love this question. I think it was originally a question that Jeff Henderson did from North Point and Andy Stanley's ministry, but he said, "What's it like to be on the other side of me?" So if you're sitting at a table, what does it feel like to be on the other side of me as a leader? And when you go somewhere, you're leaving a wake behind you. You leave a wake in 2 areas. You leave a wake in relationships and your responsibilities, much like a boat leaves a wake behind it. So what is the wake of your presence? So when you leave the room, how are people feeling? And what's the work that did or didn't get done? Do you make projects better? Do you make projects worse? But that self-awareness, I think, opens our eyes to a lot of the brokenness and weakness that we have as leaders.
That's really good. So let me ask you a question on this, because I love that question. What's it like to be on the other side of me? Talking about your wake, but with that, you really are relying on feedback to come up to you in that self-awareness of your leadership. So feedback, in a lot of ways, you have to mine,
right?
You have to dig for that upward feedback to create that safe place to create, or else you just get fluff. You've been successful, but if you don't have somebody who's there to really speak that, or to be able to, for you to be able to mine that out, then you may not get accurate feedback. So how do you, as a senior leader, when you come in to try and get that self-awareness, how are you mining for that upward feedback that is as accurate as possible?
Yeah, I like, after meetings, to ask the question, what's one thing that I could have said or done differently? So to get feedback, how did that land? I also, it's very beneficial for me, and I know that not everybody has this privilege, but I get the privilege of doing a lot of stuff with my wife together. We do a lot of meetings, and I like for her to be in the room with me. Again, I know not everybody can do that, but it certainly does. It certainly does cultivate a level of self-awareness. Like, in a staff meeting, when we have snacks on the table, and I want to grab like my 3rd bag of Skinny Pop, which it no longer is Skinny Pop after the 3rd bag.
I think Skinny Pop is your kryptonite, man. I've been in those meetings.
Oh my gosh. Well, nobody else on staff is going to say you shouldn't have that. But when your wife's sitting right next to you, she doesn't care. She's like, you don't need another bag of Skinny Pop. You don't need to eat that 5th bag of granola. It's like, so I guess having her in the room certainly helps. I would also say, David, that there's a caution on this, because not everybody really does have your best interest in mind as a leader.
That's good. So that's good.
You need people that really do love you and care about you, and they care about the organization, and they care about you. And there's a lot of people who would want to criticize every leader, and they feel free to do that on social media. And it's not that you can't learn from that, but I don't think that those conversations or those criticisms are meant to be taken to heart the same way people who truly know you, their feedback should be received.
Yeah. So you need to seek out those people who have your interest in the organization's best at heart, and they're the ones who they're gonna tell it to you straight, because they really do care, and they'll do it in a good way. I think that's really good. So making sure as a leader, stay humble, to receive the feedback, to ask the questions. I love how you said, and I've been in those meetings where you've asked that a lot, like, hey, what can I do better in how I presented that or talked about that? And I think that sets a tone for the team as well there in that self-awareness.
Yeah. The other thing too, there's a couple parts of this. So I do want to get into like some of the tools that we can use, but you do have to filter. So for example, like if I say to my kids, what can I do to be a better dad? They're going to tell me, well, you could take me to Starbucks more often, or you could, you could buy me a PS5, but their feedback, I mean, that shows me what they want. So not everybody is, so for example, in order to lead, you have to make people uncomfortable at times.
Yeah.
So you can't lead an organization where everybody always agrees with everything you do and always agrees with everything that you say. So it's helpful and beneficial at times to know, oh, that's how that made you feel, or oh, that's that impacted you that way. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't be bold as a leader. And so you have to, there's really this dance of getting feedback and letting that feedback form you and make you better as a leader. But also there are times where you have a gut sense or an intuition that maybe not everybody agrees with, but you still need to lean into that as a leader. Mm-hmm. So I want to encourage leaders, give feedback, be collaborative, but also remember that there are going to be times in your leadership where you will need to make people feel uncomfortable. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to cultivate this kind of leadership where you're completely unaware of how you're impacting people.
That's good.
So it's like you want to know, okay, I'm making people feel uncomfortable, but I'm doing it right now because this is the right thing to do to get to move us forward, mm-hmm. or even to help this person grow. I gotta say some things or do some things that are going to stretch them.
So what I know we want to get into a couple of tools here on this one. What tools are you finding really helpful right now?
Yeah, I like, there's 4 big tools I like to use, and I use them at different times, but the Enneagram is the one that lots and lots of people are into and have their number and change their number and all that. So that's a great.
My favorite in the Enneagram is when somebody's like, yeah, I'm a 8, 4, 1, 3. Sometimes I'm a 6.
Whatever.
That's not how it works, in case you've never looked into it.
Whatever suits you, man. So the Road Back to You is a good resource on that. Strengths Finder, where you get your top 5 strengths or discover your strengths. The Myers-Briggs, there's some more in-depth version of Myers-Briggs. So I did that recently. Culture Index is another one that we've done. And it actually, if you are listening to us talk right now and you want a link to do Culture Index, just message us and we'll get you a link that you can actually take that and we'll send you your results for free.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the link on that, David? Do you know? What's the email? Where should they email if they want a link to take it?
Yeah, so we'll put the link in the leader guide.
Okay.
And in our email for this month. So you can just email us back. You'll see it on there. Say, hey, take the Culture Index. So we'll drop that in the email. If you aren't signed up for the email or see it in the notes, head over to echo.church/leadership podcast. That's echo.church/leadership podcast. And just drop in your email right there and download the leader guide. We'll send that over to you and you'll have the link for the Culture Index.
Great. That's great, man. Well, let's talk about this last one before we wrap up, and it's to move past your past. And in this idea of moving past your past, you're cultivating awareness of the things that are broken, and when you do that, maybe you'll see some things that need to be fixed. You see your weaknesses, but it's easy once you identify those weaknesses to stay in them and to wallow in the past. It's easy with your success in the past to stay in the past. So we want to move past our past. And I like to think about this both from success or good things, things that went your way, and things that didn't go the way that you wanted them to. And to learn from, for lack of better word, success and failure. And again, you got to define those, but to learn from the things that didn't go great and the things that did go great. And let those lessons help you, let them become fuel for your future.
Do you find that most leaders get hung up on their past successes or past failures?
Oh man, I would say that probably the personality plays into that a bit. Like from recollection, it seems to me like it's probably a split. Like somebody who's more kind of an Enneagram 3 kind of performer potentially could be easy to get hung up on. Well, this went great. Somebody who is a 1 on the Enneagram that's a perfectionist might get a little bit more hung up on the things that they didn't do great. An 8 might get hung up on the things that others around them didn't do great. So yeah, maybe the wiring does play into what you get stuck on.
Yeah, I think it also is, again, we come back to your view of success. We want to be successful as leaders. We want to win. We're all about that. But if you're overly focused on that, then you may get a jaded view of either one that sticks with you.
Yeah, I could tell you for me personally, I struggle more with getting angry about past failures. So, and again, this is probably related to my wiring, but I'm just like, man, I should have done better. I should have thought of that ahead of time. I should have, so it becomes it becomes a little bit of like an obsession. Like I should have done that. So I just have learned I have to give myself a reasonable season or period of time, 24 to 48 hours to mourn the failure, but then to turn that failure into fuel. And we talked about this a few episodes ago about the concept of failure. But defining, it's really not a failure if you learn from it and you get better as you go along. But I think the core principle here is to not allow what has happened in the past to blind you to what is possible in the future. So even when you think about the things that you've not been able to do, sometimes we determine future vision based upon current capacity. And your future is not based upon your current ability right now. Your future, your ability to dream and see into the future, your capacity will have to catch up to your vision. And if I'm so focused on what I'm not or what I've done, then I won't be able to see what is possible ahead of me into the future.
That's really good. Well, is there anything else on this first part that you want to add to help us stay hungry and humble?
I like to refer to Tom Brady. I know a lot of people don't like him, but I do. And I know that Billy Honecker, who listens to the Echo Leadership podcast, loves Tom Brady. And I am fascinated by his effectiveness as a quarterback. And the truth is, he didn't become the greatest of all time by continuing to dwell on his previous Super Bowl rings. So he got a Super Bowl ring, and then he celebrated for a period of time, and then he moved on. And so thank God for the great things he's done in your past. Thank the people who've helped you get to where you are. Celebrate those victories and create a culture of celebration. But once the Super Bowl party is over, get back to work and get ready for the next season. And we're going to talk more about that in the next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up today, we want to thank you for jumping on and joining us. And we got to give a special shout out to a few people. Last month in our last episode, we gave away a book called The Motive by Patrick Lencioni. And just special shout out to a few people. One, Brandon Bruce, Andy
Brandon.
Phillips, Tim Alcorn, Ezekiel Abenden. Thank you for tuning in last month. Each of you received the book, The Motive, from us, for jumping in and being part of the Echo Leadership Podcast tribe and being here where we want to get better as leaders. So we look forward to next month's episode, part 2 of this conversation on staying hungry and humble. We can't wait to have you join with us again. So thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, and being part of this podcast. We really do hope it helps you get better as a leader. So we'll see you on a future episode.
See you guys.